Bonsoir et bienvenue au premier débat de la course à la chefferie du Parti conservateur du Canada. C'est le premier de nos débats officiels et il sera entièrement en français. Notre deuxième débat aura lieu ici, demain soir, et il sera en anglais. Je m'appelle Daniel Nowlan et je suis accompagné de l'honorable Lisa Raitt. Nous sommes coprésidents du comité organisateur de l'élection du chef et nous serons vos modérateurs pour les deux débats. Je prendrai la direction du débat ce soir, mais Lisa sera en charge demain. Nous diffusons ce débat en direct d'un studio de télévision à Toronto. Très bien, commençons. Voici comment la soirée va se dérouler. Nous commencerons par les candidats et candidates qui feront leurs remarques d'ouverture dans l'ordre déterminé par un tirage au sort. Chaque personne disposera de 60 secondes. Nous avons demandé aux Canadiens et Canadiennes de soumettre des questions vidéo sur n'importe quel sujet et nous avons reçu plus de 1000 vidéos. On vous remercie beaucoup. Lisa et moi, en tant que modérateurs, avons choisi...
Lisa and I, as moderators, have selected some of these questions for tonight and tomorrow's debates. After the opening remarks, the debate will take place in two parts. The first will be a face-to-face, in which two candidates will debate together. A new video question will be aired for every section of the face-to-face debate, and the two candidates will debate each other for 2 minutes after each of them has provided a short answer to the questions. All candidates will have an opportunity to debate each of their opponents once. In the second part of the debate, there will be video questions put to all candidates. Each of them will have 2 minutes to answer the question. We will then open a 5-minute debate in which all candidates can take part. We will go through as many questions as time allows. The debate will last approximately 2 hours to give all candidates a reasonable opportunity to speak to you, members of the Conservative Party, and to all Canadians. Before we welcome the next potential leader, we would like you to know that the Conservative Party has taken all necessary precautions on assemblies. So there are only 10 people in the room, and you will see that the candidates will be well spaced, thus respecting physical distancing directives. So now we would like to introduce the candidates to the 2020 leadership race. Mr. Erin O'Toole.
Monsieur Peter MacKay.
Mr. Peter MacKay.
Monsieur Derek Sloan. Et Madame Leslyn Lewis. Messieurs, Madame, bienvenue.
Gentlemen, Madam, welcome, and let's begin. We will begin with opening remarks. Mr. O'Toole, you have 60 seconds. Dear friends, it is a pleasure for me to address you in French, founding language of this country. This evening, I will make mistakes, but please know that I will continue to improve my French. Canadians and Quebecers are very concerned about their future. It is time to take back the reins of this country. I'm not a career politician. I have served in the armed forces. I am a lawyer and a businessman. I have an action plan, a plan to protect Canada, to balance our budget and to reduce your family's taxes. I am a true blue candidate and I respect the Quebec nation. I know what needs to be done to win in Quebec, but particularly I know what one mustn't do. As leader, I will unite the party, win the next election, and put the country back on track.
Monsieur O'Toole, Monsieur MacKay,
Thank you, Mr. O'Toole. Mr. MacKay, 60 seconds. Dear Conservative friends in Quebec and Acadia and all Francophones in Canada, this evening I'm very proud to be able to address you in French in spite of my accent. Quebec is very important to me, and I'm very happy to be able to count on a strong team of senators and a majority of members of Parliament from Quebec. Quebec has been very hard hit by COVID-19. I would like to thank all frontline workers. You are our heroes. The issue is to choose the best candidate that can beat Justin Trudeau. I want to be a leader for all Conservatives, because when we are united, we, the Conservatives, can accomplish truly great things. Thank you, and wishing us all a good debate. Thank you, Mr. MacKay. Mr. Sloan, we have all been very hard hit by the accident at Lac Mégantic, and it is very surprising that Justin Trudeau's government hasn't acted. As leader, I would work with the government to make sure that Quebec is protected. Pregnancy is not a disease. Abortion cannot be health care. As Prime Minister, I would prevent Canada from funding abortions internationally and encourage debate on this. I believe that it's very important for the federal government to effectively and efficiently support the provinces in full respect of provincial jurisdiction, including Quebec's. Thank you, Mr. Sloan. Ms. Lewis, you have 60 seconds. I am standing to be leader of the Conservative Party because there are problems that I consider important to me and to our country. And these problems are not being properly dealt with. My platform is going to focus on the community, the First Nations communities, the economy, good international relations, a strategy that is focused on Canada, compassion to vulnerable people, seniors, veterans, disabled people, and the family as the cornerstone of society. I have a sincere desire to help the party and the country and lead it into prosperity and freedom for everyone. Thank you.
Merci.
Thank you, Ms. Lewis. Thank you, gentlemen. Madam, we will now move to our face-to-face debates. The first question is to Erin O'Toole and Peter MacKay. It's from a young man in Vancouver on national defence. Good evening to all candidates. Hello from Vancouver. Here is my question. As leader of the Conservative country, what are you doing, what will you do to make sure that members of the Canadian Armed Forces have the equipment they need to do their work? Thank you. Mr. O'Toole, please begin. 30 seconds. Thank you for the question, Daniel. I am proud of being a veteran. And as a Prime Minister, I will make sure that our armed forces have the equipment they need. The men and women in uniform are defending our rights, and as Prime Minister, I will defend the rights of people, including women, to choose for themselves when it comes to abortion. And if you hear anything to the contrary tonight, it will be a lie. Thank you. Mr. MacKay, 30 seconds. Thank you for your question. I served Canada as Minister of National Defence. I served during wartime. I came to see you 19 times in combat zones in Afghanistan, and that is very important to understanding the needs of our armed forces. I'm extremely proud of working with other ministers in the government, as I did when I was minister. I led efforts to rebuild our army when I was Minister of Defence. We had 14 years of Liberal government, and it was not good for the army. Thank you, Mr. MacKay. Mr. MacKay, thank you for your work as Minister of National Defence, but you didn't deliver the goods. You didn't deliver the fighters, the F-35s that our forces needed. I went to Bagotville. I did a tour in Bagotville in the Saguenay, and we need those fighters. So what happened? What is happening with that? That's not quite correct, Mr. O'Toole. When we were in government, we bought a great deal of new equipment, which was leading edge. The fighter was a government project, a project of our government. I worked with other ministers and our Prime Minister to buy those fighters. Our allies are counting on us. And it's clear that when you're in government, you need to work on those contracts. But you didn't deliver. The fighters, you didn't deliver. Mr. O'Toole, our government, well, you criticized our Conservative government and how it dealt with those contracts. Yes, I was the minister for 6 years in Mr. Harper's government. And thank you for pointing that out. You have been here for 11 months, and I appreciate the opportunity of working with you. As a veteran, well, I would be the first veteran since Lester B. Pearson to become Prime Minister. It is time to have a leader that has real-life experience, Mr. MacKay. Certainly you have other kinds of experience, that's true. And I'm certainly someone who delivered for our armed forces. That is your opinion, Mr. O'Toole, but I work with other ministers, all other ministers, to deliver new planes, helicopters, tanks. Thank you. Thank you. Second question. The second question will be to Derek Sloan and Leslyn Lewis. A young woman is asking a question on the environment and water. My question is on fresh water in Canada. We're very lucky as Canadians. Our borders are such that we have 20% of the world's fresh water. If you are elected to head the Conservative Party, can you explain what your vision for fresh water is and how we can balance conserving our water resources with the ideas of the Conservative Party when it comes to building up the economy and growing it in the world? How can we balance that with managing freshwater resources, not just for Canadians, but the world? Thank you.
Mr. Sloan, you have 30 seconds. You can start. I'll provide adequate funding for infrastructure to stop the dumping of wastewater into our rivers. I'll foster green technology also to reduce this dumping as well. This is a major issue in our country today. We also have a choice to make. We have to work against alarmism, and we have to find real solutions to our issues. Ms. Lewis, you have 30 seconds. Well, my policy on the environment will guarantee Canadians access to fresh drinking water and will protect the land. We will protect the environment by adopting real policies to protect the environment. We have to scrap the carbon tax, which does not protect the environment. The carbon tax makes families even poorer and also undermines agriculture. Mr. Sloan, Ms. Lewis, the debate is now open. 2 minutes. Ms. Lewis, I think that a solution to protect fresh water has to be a genuine, environmentally friendly policy. For me, there are many liberal solutions which are based on alarmism, basically. And in my opinion, the real factors that impact the environment and solutions to protect fresh water, well, these are solutions that Conservatives must use and must build into our environmental plan. I'm not against the targets set out in the Paris Accord, as long as they don't undermine our sovereignty. My policy on the environment would guarantee Canadians access to fresh drinking water, pure air, and uncontaminated land. So your plan for the Paris Agreement is to scrap it or not? Is that your plan? No, I'm not opposed to the Paris Accord. I'm not against the targets set in the Paris Accord, as long as they don't undermine our sovereignty, of course. Well, I think that this accord makes it impossible for us to protect our sovereignty. What within the accord undermines our sovereignty? Well, our sovereignty is very, very important to Canadians. And this agreement makes it impossible for Canada to have its sovereignty respected, or to have Quebec's sovereignty respected, for that matter. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Third question now. The third question is for Ms. Lewis and Mr. O'Toole. Ms. Rivière du Nord, who wants to ask a question on pipelines. Hello, I'm France Gagnon from Rivière du Nord in Quebec. I'd like to know the position of the candidates on the energy corridor, especially as it pertains to where it crosses Quebec. Thank you very much. Good evening. Ms. Lewis, 30 seconds. Well, I believe that Quebecers and all Canadians should be properly served by their federal government in the language of their choice. Language is something that distinguishes Quebec from the rest of Canada. I think Quebecers should be properly served in French. It's their right. This is why I'll be learning French. I've made a lot of progress. Mr. O'Toole, 30 seconds. Thank you very much for the question, France. I will be a champion for all energy sectors across the country, in the West and, of course, in Quebec. And I will support the LNG project in Quebec. I'll stand up against the clique in the Plateau in Montreal. My policies will be built around the energy sector. Thank you very much, Mr. O'Toole. You now have 2 minutes for the open debate. Well, it's a very important issue for our country. That goes without saying, I think. I support projects in the West, Tech Frontier, for example, and I also support the LNG project in Quebec, which will create 7,000 jobs in Saguenay alone. It's very important for jobs in our rural communities in Quebec and across Western Canada as well. The development of natural resources will be at the heart of economic recovery. We must ensure that our products are able to get to tidewater, but we must continue to invest in infrastructure and exports. We have to invest in our rail network and our pipelines so that we can get our products to market, to tidewater. As I said, I support projects in Quebec and in Western Canada as well, and in my platform I've put forward ideas for the future of the energy sector and also for the forestry sector, for mines. And Quebec has created thousands of jobs with hydroelectricity. I support that sector. I'm very, very proud of our natural resources in Canada. I'm proud of our commitment to Aboriginals as well. We must adopt a collaborative approach. We must work together with our provinces. We shouldn't take a confrontational approach like the Trudeau government has. We must be bold enough to develop our natural resources, despite the interference of other actors, and we must make sure that Canadians get back to work as well. I'll work in close cooperation with Premier Legault on the Saguenay project. I'd also work with Premier Kenny, who's a personal friend in the West as well. It's very, very important for our economy. Thank you very much. Let's move on to the fourth question now. It's from Mr. MacKay and Mr. Sloan. From Mr. Dubois from Saint-Antoine. And his question is on economic recovery. Hello, I'm Stéphane Descharges. I'm from New Brunswick. If you're elected leader of the Conservative Party of Canada, what will your plan be to ensure economic recovery in the provinces, especially at the Atlantic? Will this plan revolve around the East-West pipeline? Mr. MacKay, you can lead off. You have 30 seconds. Thank you for your question. I think it's perhaps the most important question that'll be asked in this debate. What do we do after COVID-19, after the pandemic? We've been focusing on people's health to now. But for people's health and the economy go together. They go hand in hand. I have an 8-point plan to rebuild our economy. I have a plan to build a pipeline. But more than that, I plan to create a corridor across the country for all natural resources, including Quebec hydroelectricity. Mr. Sloan, 30 seconds. There can't be economic recovery after COVID-19 if the oil and gas sector do not recover. So I'll make sure that the UN Declaration on Aboriginal peoples will not be enshrined in legislation. I would cancel the Paris Accord. I'm the only candidate to say that. The left has used the Paris Accord to implement taxes like the carbon tax. No to carbon tax and no to the Paris Accord. 2 minutes for the open debate. Mr. MacKay, I'll be the Minister of Job Creation. I have an 8-point plan for natural resources, for technology in the north. We need to be able to actually produce what our economy needs. I want to help small and medium businesses as well. I want to rebuild confidence, consumer confidence and business confidence as well. We need to have a competitive tax regime as well. We also need to have a trade policy that fosters employment. I want to create an economic corridor across the country to enable us to export our natural resources. Mr. MacKay, I have a question for you. As a leader of the opposition, what would you do if the economy was closed down? If we go into lockdown again, if ever there's a second wave of COVID-19? Well, I'll continue to work with the provinces and the private sector. Of course, I will respect provincial jurisdiction. They have jurisdiction over their economy. The first priority has to be the health of Canadians. But to beat COVID-19, we need a vaccine. We need a vaccine now and in the future. But on the economy again, I will create an economic corridor. I'll work with Premier Legault. I won't be imposing anything. There will be consultation. He said, Mr. O'Toole said that he had a plan for a pipeline without consultation. That can't work for Quebec and the other provinces. But what will you do if Quebec refuses to allow the pipeline to cross the province? Well, we have to have a plan and to put forward the positive spin-offs for Quebec. Quebec is developing the LNG project in Saguenay. That's important for Quebec. Fifth question is for Eric Sloan and Erin O'Toole. It comes from the Conservative candidate in Moncton, the last election. Candidates. I'm from Dieppe in New Brunswick. My question is the following. Official languages in the country are a unique asset for all Canadians, economically as well as socially. We have just celebrated the 50th anniversary of the Official Languages Act, and we have a deep need to actually modernize this legislation. As leader of our party, what type of changes would you make to the Act, and why would you make those changes? Thank you, and enjoy the rest of the debate. Mr. O'Toole, you can start. 30 seconds. Thank you very much, Sylvie. I agree with you. It is an asset. I'm proud of our two national languages, and I will always advocate for language rights in Quebec and across the country, for that matter, for Francophone communities in the West, in Ontario, and also for Acadians as well. I will modernize the Official Languages Act. I think it's very important to do that right away. Mr. Sloan, 30 seconds, please. Francophone and Anglophone Canadians should have access to public federal services in the official language of their choice. Only New Brunswick is officially bilingual. Other regions in the country are unilingual English or unilingual French. The government of Quebec should offer services only in French, and the same should apply in Alberta, but in English this time. Mr. Sloan, the debate's open for 2 minutes. Thank you once again, Sylvie, for running for the party in the last election. As Sylvie has just said, it's an asset for our country. And two national languages, our official languages rather, are an asset to our country. I learned French at 18 in the forces. My daughter Molly and my son Jack are in immersion at school right now. So I'd like to say hi to my kids this evening. I think it's time to increase the role, or to enhance the role of the Commissioner to look at services provided to Francophones across the country. Mr. O'Toole, I have two questions for you. To modernize the legislation, what's your plan? My next question, what would you do for those who find it difficult to find a job in the federal government because they don't speak French, because they're unilingual Anglophones, or because they're unilingual Francophones, for that matter? Well, I said I learned my French in the Canadian Forces, and it's very important for our national institutions to have a bilingual approach. There are two founding nations in this country. I support that, and I will always advocate for that. As Prime Minister, it's important in Quebec. It's important for the rest of the country as well. We have to take an approach to services to improve them. We have to make sure that we provide services to the Francophone community. Ontario, for example, there is a Francophone community in Ontario. But to modernize the Act, what's your plan exactly? Well, I'll take an approach to improve services and to improve service in both official languages. Thank you. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Sixth question tonight, and the last question for the face-off, Mr. MacKay and Ms. Lewis. Now the question comes from someone from Richmond, Athabasca, and it's on agriculture. Hello, I'm Isabelle Deschênes from Richmond, Athabasca in Quebec. My question is the following. What do you intend to do to deal with foreign workers who are so important for us in the agricultural sector? Already, it took a long time to actually get approval for these workers. Paperwork was terrible, and now there's the added problem of COVID-19. How do you intend to improve our food sovereignty in Canada? Thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to meeting you again, and perhaps in person this time. Mr. MacKay, you can start. 30 seconds. Thank you, Isabelle. Now, I've thought about this question a lot. The same thing applies to all sectors. But for farmers, well, they need temporary workers. They need temporary foreign workers. But it's important to have a system that protects Canada. I would prefer Canadians to do these jobs. But in some sectors, in the natural resource sector and in agriculture, for example, well, those sectors need temporary foreign workers. Ms. Lewis, 30 seconds. Well, farming is really the basis for our society. They feed us. Trudeau gave 252 million to farmers, 9 million to students, and 850 million to the WHO. I think these figures actually highlight his priority. My priorities will be to protect the agriculture industry. Thanks, Ms. Lewis. Open debate, 2 minutes now. Well, agriculture will be at the heart of my economic recovery plan after COVID-19. First of all, I support supply management. It's a system which works well for Quebec and for the whole of Canada. There won't be any new concessions under my plan in any new trade agreement. We've always tried to find new markets for our products, for our agricultural products. The world needs energy and needs food as well, and Canada has a greater role to play in the world in building the economy here at home, but also in helping other countries to build theirs as well. Each province has its own resources which can be pooled to serve the whole country. For example, the dairy industry in Quebec is a major industry. My priority would be to protect the agriculture industry. I would provide assistance to the sector by maintaining the supply management system. You're right, we have to protect the interests of the agricultural sector and all those who are working in it. Isabelle mentioned the importance of our sovereignty, and COVID-19, I think, has shown just how important it is to protect our sovereignty, our basic sovereignty. Our products are the best and the safest in the world. And the government had an opportunity to promote our goods, the goods we produce here in Canada, across the world, to help farmers, to help people working in fisheries, in the Maritimes, on the West Coast as well, and to promote the goods we produce here. It's an asset we have. It's an asset for our economy. And we must support our natural resources sector. That's the end of the face-to-face part of the debate. I'd like to thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We'll now move on to the second part of the debate tonight, where all candidates will have the opportunity to answer each question asked. So the next question, please.
Bonjour, je m'appelle Shaita Rahman. Je viens de Montréal, Québec. Ma question pour les candidats est: l'économie canadienne a été gravement affectée par COVID-19. Quelles mesures?
My question is this. I'm from Montreal, Quebec. My question is this. The economy has been hard hit. What plan do you have for economic recovery in Quebec? Thank you, Shifa, for the question. This is very important. It is very important for the next leader to have a plan, and I'm the only candidate on this stage to have a detailed plan, economic plan for what will come after the COVID-19 health crisis. I have a 9-point plan to rebuild Canada, particularly small and medium-sized businesses, small business, because 66% of Canadians work for a small or medium-sized business, and we need to help entrepreneurs across Canada. I also have a plan for jobs in the energy sector, the forest sector in the West, and in Quebec and Ontario. I have a plan for steel and aluminium, as well as agri-food products and production. I will ensure that we are self-sufficient in the area of agri-food and agriculture, because after the pandemic, we've seen how important that is. I have a plan to make us self-sufficient in agri-food and medical equipment and in other strategic sectors. Our next leader must have experience not only as minister, but before having had a career in politics, must have had a career in the private sector. I have that as a lawyer and a businessman, and it will be extremely important after the pandemic. Do visit my website, erinotoole.ca. I have a plan. I have a specific plan for Quebecers, because we need to win in Quebec and Ontario at the next election when we become the government. Thank you, Mr. O'Toole. Mr. MacKay, you have 2 minutes. I am the only candidate who has been in government during the recession in 2008, 2009, and I have cabinet experience with others like, well, Mr. Flaherty's an economist. I have experience with him, and he had a plan to rebuild our economy then. I have an 8-point plan to increase our ability to deliver on natural resources. We had a great deal of capacity in the technology sector to attract jobs and to bring new companies into Canada, to invest in technological research. I'll just say quickly that we must not agree to let Huawei in, but we do need technology. And we can see that the COVID pandemic has increased our need because we're using the Internet for medical purposes, for all kinds of other things. We had also focused on training in technological skills, but clearly manufacturing of essential resources in Canada is hugely important. We need to help small business. And as Mr. O'Toole said, that is indeed the largest sector in our economy, but it is the very last sector for which the Prime Minister proposed help. We need to rebuild consumer confidence, and the tax system is crucial because we need to have the ability to punish tax fraud. We need policies that are favorable to jobs, and it is important in public finances for the government to do things the way the private sector does. Thank you, Mr. MacKay. Mr. Sloan, you have 2 minutes. I would also say no to Huawei, and I have proposed many measures to support small and medium-sized businesses. For example, a tax holiday for social contributions and GST, as well as other tax cuts for individuals and businesses. You can see more about that on my website. The way to make sure that the economy recovers is to support the petroleum and gas sector. It is a tremendous challenge to have that sector recover with the current laws, which have basically brought the UN Declaration for the Rights of Indigenous Peoples into our legislation. But First Nations are seeking prosperity, and we will help them through energy projects. I would oppose efforts, however, to integrate that into Canadian law when Prime Minister Trudeau introduces that kind of bill. I would repeal C-69 as well as C-48, which eliminates options for future pipelines. I would withdraw from the Paris Accord, and I am the only candidate to say that. Much of the problems caused by this pandemic could have been prevented if we had had proper care for seniors. Thank you, Mr. Sloan. Ms. Lewis, you have 2 minutes. The development of our natural resources will be a significant pillar in our economic recovery. We have to make sure that our products reach markets, reach tidewater, be exported. We have to invest in our infrastructure, in our bridges, in our highways, in our pipelines, so that we can bring our products to market. We must have the courage to develop our own natural resources in spite of international pressure, and make sure that Canadians can go back to work. We need to repeal Bills C-48 and C-69 that Justin Trudeau's government has set up, because those policies are very harmful to entrepreneurs. Thank you. Ms. Lewis, 5 minutes for all candidates. It takes a real leader to get through the crisis, and I'm the only one who has the needed experience to do that. We have a specific plan. After a general election, I'm going to ask my cabinet to have an immediate action plan right after the election. And it's very necessary to move immediately. It is crucial to have measures in place. Mr. MacKay, you attacked me for my Quebec platform. Oh, it's very strange that Mr. O'Toole should be talking about attacks, because he's the only one who has attack ads attacking other Conservatives. At the last leadership race, he said, "I've never attacked other Conservatives." But yes, he did have a plan, and then he changed it. He changed his plan. He has a new sort of carbon tax, and I really hope that we won't end up with a leader who supports a carbon tax like Mr. O'Toole. That's another lie, Mr. MacKay. No, it's true. Unfortunately, your team attacked me because of my Quebec platform, Mr. MacKay, and that is unacceptable. I have ideas for the future. I want to work for a united Canada, and those efforts are defined in my platform. Mr. MacKay, I am disappointed you have attacked me. I was the former leader of the Progressive Conservatives. I worked with Mr. Harper so that we would end up with a new Conservative Party. And we need a leader that has that kind of experience, a leader who doesn't change his plans, who doesn't say one thing in Quebec and something else elsewhere to the rest of Canada. Gentlemen, please. Let's give other candidates a chance. The topic is the economy, and I have a question for both of you. How do you plan to reduce Canada's debt with Justin Trudeau's huge deficits? Oh, that'll take a lot of time to do. In spite of the economic problems caused by COVID-19, the Canadian emergency response benefits, 8 million Canadians have gone on that program, and that's unacceptable, especially since the Trudeau government has lost our small businesses. He's lost our SMEs. I have a plan to help them get back on their feet, and I will work with all members of our parties. There are no albatrosses in my party. Unfortunately, Mr. O'Toole's plan involves higher taxes. It looks a lot like a Liberal plan would. It looks like Mr. Trudeau's plan. There's another carbon tax. When he interviewed with the National Post, he said that, yes, maybe a carbon tax was necessary to grow our economy. What we need was new jobs. That's what the private sector wanted. It's very necessary to have an approach where the provinces contribute. The federal government needs to work with the provinces. And it's important to continue increasing our ability to create jobs, because jobs are key. Jobs are key to a strong and competitive economy. It is impossible to grow our economy with more taxes like Mr. O'Toole proposes. You attacked me. Mr. MacKay, I have a question for you, Mr. MacKay. No, I have one for you. No, Mr. MacKay, I have one for you. Please stay on topic. Mr. MacKay, your Western member attacked me for my Quebec platform, and that's unacceptable. Yes, I have a lot of support from members in the West, particularly and particularly those in Quebec. I will unite the movement. I am a leader for the future. Mr. MacKay is a leader for the past. And this is so bad for our party. Next question. Good evening. You know that the environment is something that concerns more and more Canadians and Quebecers. I'd like to know your position on a stronger green energy shift across Canada. What will you do tangibly to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in Canada without taxing people more? That's an excellent question. I have a plan for the environment. Canada is not the problem, but Canada can be the solution. We have to focus on new technologies, and we are very good at that. We will be investing in them. We need to export our liquefied natural gas to countries that are still using coal. That is an excellent vision, to have our LNG exports, which are very clean and highly competitive. So I want to create a national economic corridor to export our natural resources. I'm working with all the provinces to achieve that. Unfortunately, now we have a prime minister that is against the development of our natural resources. I'm going to focus on our potential for natural resources, which will help rebuild our economy. I'm going to create jobs with that, and we will be able to export both our natural gas and our hydroelectricity. Premier Legault was looking for a way to work with all other premiers and the Prime Minister to find a national solution. That is an excellent vision, an economic corridor across the country to help the prosperity of our country, without taxing provinces, without regulatory barriers, the kinds of barriers that Prime Minister Trudeau keeps throwing up. An economic corridor is key to rebuilding our economy and to working with a broader vision, like a consensus within the country. This is a vision that will work for the economy. Thank you. Mr. Sloan, you have 2 minutes. Canadians have a choice. If they want to protect the environment, they can work for climate realism, the way I suggest, or they can vote for a more alarmist climate vision. I am the only candidate that is ready to take us out of the very unrealistic Paris Agreement, which has already been used as an excuse to force the carbon tax on the provinces. Without the Paris Agreement, Canada would be able to play a more important role on the world stage and become a steward of our environment while helping our economy. I would eliminate the carbon tax, which has no effective impact on reducing pollution. I would make sure that infrastructures were properly funded so that wastewater would no longer be discharged into our waterways. I would promote green technology to reduce emissions, and I would support local purchasing for tax relief so that communities would be better served. I would also set goals to reduce waste, provide for biodegradable packaging, while continuing to develop natural resources and pipeline. Provinces should have full authority as provided for in the Constitution. That includes an absolute right to decide on energy projects within their borders. Thank you, Mr. Sloan. Ms. Lewis, you have 2 minutes. We need a long-term plan to eliminate the deficit progressively. I have plans for tangible policies that would reduce red tape and provide incentives that would make it possible for small business to prosper. This would move Canada forward, creating jobs and a self-sufficient economy. We need to protect and support our major industries so that Canada can be much more self-sufficient in a crisis. We need a long-term plan to progressively eliminate our deficit. I can propose tangible economic policies to reduce red tape and deliver major incentives that would make it possible for small business to advance, to progress. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Lewis. 5 minutes. The debate is open to everyone. No. Apologies, Mr. O'Toole. You have 2 minutes. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Nowlan. We need a balance between economic development and the environment. It is very important to me, to my family, and to everyone's children. I have a balanced plan. I will abolish the carbon tax and support innovative projects in the regions. I will reduce greenhouse gas emissions. It is very important to have a balanced approach of that kind. Unfortunately, Mr. MacKay attacked me on my environmental platform and on my Quebec platform as well. I will respect provincial areas of jurisdiction when it comes to the environment and work very closely with the provinces, Mr. MacKay. I will work with Premier Legault. I will work with Premier Kenney. It is a matter of respect, Mr. MacKay. I worked as a lawyer in the private sector on environmental issues. I have a record on the environment, both as a lawyer and as a member of Parliament. We need to have a serious environmental platform for the next election. And as leader of the Conservative Party, I will have exactly that, a balanced approach that supports major energy projects in the West and in Quebec, and at the same time, because this is very important, I will have a real plan, not just a few words like Mr. MacKay throws out. My plan is on my website, erinotoole.ca, and I would like to have your support for my Quebec platform and for the future of our party.
Thank you very much, Mr. O'Toole. I'm sorry, once again. You now all have the floor for 5 minutes. Go ahead. Well, I have a serious plan for the environment and to rebuild our economy as well. And we have to play a role, a significant role in the world to reduce greenhouse gases. It was an issue for us in the last election. We had a plan, of course, but nobody understood the plan. There was no passion. We didn't try to actually get our message across. Mr. Mulroney was a champion of the environment. He did a lot on acid rain and on the ozone layer. These are good examples of Canadian government initiatives, conservative government initiatives. We worked with the US. We worked with other countries as well to take an inclusive approach, to come up with good solutions. And by doing that, by protecting the environment, we created jobs. So it's possible to strike a balance between the environment and the economy. But to pay for the transition to new technologies, we need to export our liquefied natural gas. That's one of the contributions we can make to reducing greenhouse gas emissions. My plan will get results. I'll never impose solutions on the provinces, as Mr. O'Toole says he will do. He says that there will be a pipeline across Quebec without consultation. That's a lie. It's another lie. You've changed your position. Never, never. My plan is my plan. It's on my website, like yours. Well, one day you have an approach to major polluters, and then the next day you attack me for the same approach. You're flip-flopping. You changed. Oh, it's a lovely expression. A lovely expression you just used. Flip-flopping. What you're saying is that you'll be imposing pipelines on Quebec. So that means that you changed your position, perhaps because of what your friend Mr. Kenny said to you. And at the outset, at the start of this debate, Mr. O'Toole mentioned using the War Measures Act. That's the same as Mr. Trudeau. No, I'll be scrapping the carbon tax. You're a veteran. What we need are not war measures. This is what Mr. Trudeau, father and son, have done. And now we're looking at Erin Trudeau. It's incredible for you to take the same position as the Trudeaus. You change your position every week. We can't have a leader that continually flip-flops, Mr. MacKay. You changed your plan, Mr. O'Toole. You've changed it. One page of your plan completely disappeared. Your plan on the environment, a page of it disappeared. You went to the West, and you were convinced to change it. That's why we have a major issue with you. It's the Western MPs that have looked at your platform. They didn't like it, so you removed part of it. You changed your mind. I think that the other candidates would like to get a word in. I have a question for you. How do you intend to reach the Paris Accord agreements without a carbon tax? You said that Erin O'Toole's platform is carbon tax 2.0, but your plan is not based around a carbon tax. How do you intend, in fact, to reach the goals? Well, we can use LNG. It's an opportunity for us to actually export that to earn money from other countries. It'll help us to help other countries in the Asia-Pacific, Pakistan, for example. And with that money, we can work with Aboriginals, and we can continue to try to find solutions to our major issues, the major issues that face. Climate change is our number 1 priority. Well, he'll have a different policy next week, won't he, Peter? Well, look, Mr. O'Toole, I hope that your position on social issues will be the same in the English debate as it is this evening. You say one thing in French and something completely different in English. That's not right. It's not honest. I'll say it slowly. Yes, say it slowly. Go ahead. I've already set out my position. I'm disappointed by your campaign. It's all based around lies. Are you pro-choice or pro-life? Tell us. Tell us now. Tell us now. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We'll now move on to the next question from Alberta. Good evening. I'm a member of the Black Conservative Association, and I live in Calgary. My question for the candidates is the following. If you're elected leader of the Conservative Party, what will be the arguments that you'll bring to bear to convince young Canadians to vote Conservative to beat the Liberals in the next election? Thank you very much. Mr. Sloan, 2 minutes. Well, I'm the only candidate who's prepared to speak out against socialist and Marxist lies. I'm the only candidate who is prepared to talk about these issues publicly. The mass media doesn't represent my positions on this issue. As leader, I will get rid of the culture of exclusion from our party, the exclusion of various people from the campaign. I want to unite our Conservative family so that we can beat the Liberals. Young people don't like a culture of exclusion. We must be bold enough to put forward our basic fundamental values. Liberal values are from the far left. For the far left, when it comes to conversion therapy, for example, we must intervene. I would never interfere in the choice of our supporters. Many young Canadians are social conservatives. They're pro-life as well. We should remember that Prime Minister Harper won his majority government after having scrapped funding for abortion abroad. And Doug Ford in Ontario swept Greater Toronto by running against the Liberal sex ed program and by promising to repeal it. We can have winning policies if we are true to our values. I also have a plan for the freedom of expression. I have a plan to deal with the culture of banning on Twitter and Facebook. Freedom of expression is very important for young Canadians. I have a significant plan to deal with that issue. Ms. Lewis, you have 2 minutes now. Well, my strategy to win at the next election for the Conservatives will allow us to move forward to make gains in the urban centres by reaching out to those who have similar conservative values. I would deal with our regional discontent, and I would work to protect the environment while rebuilding our economy. I would also unite the country and our party. I would focus on bringing social conservatives and progressive and tax conservatives and libertarians together under one tent. I would also respect people's beliefs and the opinions of everyone. Thank you. Mr. O'Toole, you have 2 minutes. Thank you very much for the question, Bettina, and thank you for your leadership with ABC and Mr. Kenny's government. We have to attract young people, the support of young people in the next election, and we'll do that through ideas to make the future of our country more prosperous. We have to have new ideas, innovative ideas. We must support individual rights, human rights, and I have a very good record on that. Unfortunately, Mr. MacKay voted against an LGBTQ bill in 2013. The environment is also a very important issue for young people in Canada, and this is why I've developed a plan, a detailed plan, in my platform, in my policy platform. I am proposing measures to facilitate the transfer of small and medium businesses and to allow young people to invest in creating and building a new business. We can win through ideas, not through looking backwards. I'm putting forward innovative policies. I have policies that are specific for young people. I'm the only candidate that has a specific platform for Quebec. We have to win more support, more seats in Quebec and in Ontario as well. And we can do that if we attract young people's support in the areas around Montreal and around Toronto. My approach as leader will be to win in those areas. Thank you very much, Mr. O'Toole. You have 2 minutes, Mr. MacKay. Thanks, Bettina. It's a very important issue for us because in the last election, we had an issue with perception. We have to change people's perception of us. The Conservative Party is an inclusive party. It's a big tent, that goes without saying. But we have to prove that to people. My position is very clear on social issues. It's important in Quebec and across the country, I think. I think it's necessary. I'm pro-choice. Personally, But I agree now with gay marriage, marriage between people of the same sex. I can win in Ontario and Atlantic Canada, and I can strengthen our base in the West. That's what we have to do. We have to take a position where we welcome everyone into our party. We have to present ourselves as an inclusive, modern party with clear and modern policies. Clarity is very, very important in Quebec. We have to put forward a plan to protect the environment. I have a plan to do that. I also support LGBTQ2 communities without reservation. We have to defend and advocate for our natural resource sector. We have to work with others to protect the environment as well. We have to reach out to young people, cultural communities, Aboriginals, Francophones as well. It's important, it's crucial to continue to present ourselves as a party that says, yes, please come in. We respect you. What's your opinion? What's your perspective? We have to put an end to the politics of division put forward by Mr. Trudeau and Mr. O'Toole. We need a party where people can see themselves reflected, where we resonate for people. You all now have the floor for 5 minutes. Go ahead. Mr. MacKay. You just talked about division. You are the candidate that's called our members albatrosses. You went after me for the way I voted in 2013 on LGBTQ issues. There were only 18 of you who voted against the same-sex marriage bill. You've said that you want to bring our country and our party together. You're the wrong person to do that. You're an angry man, Mr. O'Toole. You're always angry. It's the same thing applies to your friend, Mr. Kenny. I support the gay community. I am a candidate that respects and will consult the LGBTQ community and other communities as well. I've continued to work with everyone across the country. You've attacked me. You've attacked me in attack acts. I've held lots of Zoom calls with young Conservatives, with cultural communities. I've continued to use new technology to have genuine conversations. That's important for our party. We have to grasp this opportunity to reach out to everyone. People are looking for an alternative to Mr. Trudeau. Mr. Trudeau is facing a lot of issues. He's hypocritical in many areas. We have to be an alternative. I have a question from Mr. MacKay. Mr. MacKay, would you allow ministers to vote their conscience on social issues? Well, the answer to that question, Dr. Lewis, is yes. That's another flip-flopping, another flip-flop. Under my leadership, we will respect the decisions made by members of our party. In the convention in Halifax in 2018, there was a vote on this issue. The issue of allowing members to vote their conscience on social issues. And I think that members and cabinet members will respect, in fact, the decision of the majority. It's a very important principle. I'm quite happy to see that Mr. MacKay has changed his position. I haven't. He's now saying that his ministers will vote against social bills. It's important to respect all our members, Mr. MacKay. Why did you go after me? Why did you attack me? Well, that's the reason why I have the majority of the caucus behind me. If I didn't respect people, they wouldn't support me. But I have many members of caucus, many members who support me. The majority of Quebec members, I'm very proud of my Quebec team as well. I have the 5 Conservatives in sitting Conservative members in Quebec, senators as well. We need to expand our team to win the next election. Well, new members of our party, that's the key. Mr. MacKay was the leader of the Progressive Conservative Party 17 years ago. What we need now is a leader for the future, not for the past. This is why I have the support of all members of Parliament under 35 years old. They're behind my leadership bid. It's very important to have a leader in the House of Commons who can actually debate in the House of Commons in both official languages and who's capable of winning the next election with a serious approach, with serious policies. And who can put forward specific ideas for Quebec. Peter MacKay attacked me on my Quebec platform, but I'm very proud of my Quebec platform. I'm very proud of my ideas, of the candidates who are well known in their respective communities. I have a team on the ground, and that allows us to win in Quebec next time. It'll allow us to get back on track. You've mentioned Quebec a lot of times, but you tend to forget to mention Saskatchewan, the Atlantic, and the other provinces as well. What are you trying to do? You're just trying to win votes in Quebec. We need a national plan. We need to beat Justin Trudeau. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll now move on to our last question now from a man in New Brunswick, and it's a question on increasing support for the party. I'm Daniel Lemaire, and I'm from Dieppe in New Brunswick. My question is very simple today. How can we expand our support and those who make contributions to the Conservative Party across the country? Ms. Lewis, you have 2 minutes. Well, I would focus on bringing progressive social conservatives, libertarian conservatives, and tax conservatives together. And I would respect everyone's point of view. Mr. O'Toole, you have 2 minutes. Thank you for your question, Mr. Daniel. This is a major issue for the future. I have a plan for Quebec. I would open an office, a leader's office in Quebec. I would do that right away. We have to be ready for an election in the next 6 months. I would give the tools that our team in Quebec needs. I would provide them with full-time employees so that they can do planning on the ground in the run-up to the next election. As I've just said, we must attract candidates across Quebec. And how do we do that? Well, we have to put forward forward-looking policies. That's why I have a platform which is specific to Quebec. I'm the only candidate this evening to do that. Unfortunately, Mr. MacKay has attacked me on my Quebec platform, but the ideas are very, very important. They're crucial for the next election, in fact. We must win to protect the future of our country. I've won 3 times in my riding in Ontario, and I will win in the suburbs around Toronto as well. I'm proud to be a Quebecer. I was born in Montreal, after all. But what we have to do is to build a team on the ground with candidates who are well prepared, who have a Quebec-centric platform. If we're to win the next election, it's very simple. We have a lot of support in the West and in the Maritimes as well. In the Atlantic provinces, we have to win more seats there also, of course. But around Greater Toronto, I can win more seats for us there through ideas. Ideas including a policy on the environment. I'm the only candidate this evening with a real environmental plan. Together, Danielle, we can win. We can win the next election. And we can do that with forward-looking ideas for Canada.
Thank you, Mr. O'Toole. Mr. MacKay, 2 minutes. Thank you, Danielle. It's crucial to us to have an approach that can garner support from the whole region. You were born in New Brunswick. I was born in Nova Scotia. I was a member for Nova Scotian riding for 6 elections. I've also been in Mr. Harper's government for almost 10 years, so I have the experience that's needed to deal with the crisis, not only the COVID-19 crisis, but the economic crisis. I have a specific plan, an 8-point plan with all the details that are needed for broad solutions. In the areas of the environment, for example, we need a clear position on social issues for young Canadians. Unfortunately, Mr. O'Toole is not clear in his positions. I had one, I should say, in the Atlantic, in Quebec, and Ontario. Quebec is not a new region to me. I've been there many times. I've worked with former Minister Stephen Blaney to award a contract to the Davie shipyard. And we've worked together and are working together to build our economy for the future. I'm sure that many people are looking for new ways to build our party and our economy, and it is crucial to have ideas, a modern approach, an approach that respects all provincial areas of jurisdiction, and an approach that young Canadians, new Canadians, Canadians living in the largest cities and everywhere have a right solution. Thank you, Mr. MacKay. Mr. Sloan, 2 minutes. We don't need a politically correct plan. We need a plan that deals with issues like poverty, housing, substance abuse. I have a very strong plan that will provide for freedom of speech, reduce immigration from 350,000 to 150,000. Immigration is a factor in housing. Housing is increasingly difficult to find in our large cities because the immigration levels are higher than the housing market can absorb. In my view, there's also a problem with projects. Canada must first be for us. Immigration and everything else, well, Canada first. That's what's most important to me. The number of new Canadians in Toronto and other large cities are conservative, socially conservative, pro-life. As I said to Prime Minister Harper and Doug Ford, values are very important to us. They're very important as we seek to expand the conservative movement. It's very important to me. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Sloan. And now, 5 minutes. Mr. Sloan, being gay is not a choice, and that's one thing that I really need to understand. There are many problems with that position because it is not the position that a modern party can take. This is not a position that respects human rights. Well, you voted against it. In 2013, you voted against it. Human rights issues and justice issues are so important to our party. We need to have a consistent position to defend human rights. Under Mr. Diefenbaker, that's what we did. This is a historic tradition for the Conservative Party. In the justice system, we had a historic position of protecting rights. I'm not saying anything else. I'm not saying the opposite at all. I was very proud to work on the first Victims Charter. I worked with Minister Blaney and Senator Boisvenu on the very first Victims Charter. Human rights are primordial in the next election because We have a Prime Minister who talks a lot. You've changed your position on these issues. We have a Prime Minister who's made a lot of mistakes. We don't need another actor. We need a real person, somebody with principles, somebody whose positions are firm, solid, that don't change like yours, Mr. O'Toole. That's the future of our party. The position we need, well, all you need to do is look at my position in the House of Commons. Mr. MacKay voted against all this 5 years ago. He's not ready for history's most important debates, the most important debates in this country's history post-pandemic. In September, we're going to be debating on the future of our country, and we need a leader in the House of Commons, and that is exactly where I am. And I've had enough experience in life before my political career. I am not a career politician like Mr. MacKay. So it's very important that we have a leader for the future, not a leader who's backward-looking. We need one who's forward-looking. For Canadians, and particularly for Quebecers, I will strengthen recognition of the Quebec nation. I will give more independence in the areas of culture and immigration to Quebec. He is not someone who voted. I voted for the Quebec nation. Mr. MacKay doesn't have the ability to make a speech in both official languages. There's something that's very important to our party. We recognized the Acadian nation. There are so many francophones in other regions of Canada. They are not all in Quebec, and we have to protect all of them. That is why we need to support Radio-Canada, because it provides information to francophones, information, news to francophones across Canada. He's not ready. I am. And I would like to speak to Quebecers. It is very important to me. Well, we need someone who does not change his position. You don't have a clear position. I am the only candidate who has a clear record on human rights. I know what I voted for, and it's on record. Derek is pro-life. Are you pro-life? Well, he's not answering because it makes him vulnerable. He's ready to attack the others, but he is not ready to take a position. I am very proud to be supporting LGBTQ communities. I've been very clear, and I've done it all along. And the community knows my position. I support their aspirations, their lives. Did you march in the Pride Parade? Yes, but. I support rights, but. I support women's rights, but. There's always a but with Mr. O'Toole. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. That concludes the debate portion of tonight's debate. We will now ask the candidates to give us their concluding statements. Mr. O'Toole. Dear friends, we need a Prime Minister who will put the country back on track, who will tackle the major challenges that we are facing, and that will have the ability to communicate with all Canadians in our two national languages. I am ready to win the debate in French. Our ancestors gave us a country that was free, strong, and prosperous. Today, our country is not on track, and as leader, I will relaunch the economy, cut corporate biases and put an end to illegal border crossings. I have a message for Conservatives in Quebec, Acadians and Francophones across this country. As Leader and Prime Minister, I will strengthen recognition of the Quebec nation and I will protect the rights of all Francophones across Canada. As Leader and Prime Minister, I will work hard for all the regions of this country and for all Francophones of all parties. I ask you for your support. Ask yourself this: which candidate will give Quebec the place that it should have as part of the next Conservative government? That power is in your hands. Thank you, Mr. O'Toole. Mr. MacKay, you have 90 seconds. Dear Conservative friends, I hope that you enjoyed this debate. I would like to thank my colleagues for our exchanges, even though we may not always share the same ideas on some issues. There is one thing that unites us. We all belong to the great Conservative family. I want to be the leader of all Conservatives and your Prime Minister. We can no longer allow Justin Trudeau to continue destroying our economies and undermining our freedoms. We need to form a majority government in the next election. I have already served Canadians as senior minister for over 10 years with a government that went through a worldwide recession. I have the experience needed to come through this crisis, and I have a plan for Canada's economic recovery. The issue is to choose the person who is in the best position to beat Justin Trudeau. I need your support. So together, let's build a Canada that's even better. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Mr. MacKay. Mr. Sloan, 90 seconds. At the beginning of this leadership race, I spoke almost no French, and now I am almost as good as some people who've been studying it for years. That attests to my determination and to my passion to lead this great nation, to represent all Canadians, and to always put Canada first. I am the only candidate who advises that Canada withdraw from the Paris Agreement, stop funding the WHO for the misleading information it has provided, and the only one who will reduce immigration levels. I will always put our country first. With regard to the demonstrations and illegal blockades, there will be one law for everyone. Quebecers understand those principles. Quebecers are the very first nationalists and patriots in this country, and I will be proud to represent them as leader of the Conservative Party. May God bless you. Thank you, Mr. Sloan. Ms. Lewis, 90 seconds. As leader of the Conservative Party, I will promote a strong economy, good international relation, a strategy that focuses on Canada first, and a Canada that shows compassion to seniors, veterans, disabled persons, and other vulnerable people. I will promote the family as the cornerstone of society. I am the only candidate who will make and bring about real change and who will stand firm against liberal attacks. I am the only candidate with a credible environmental plan. I am the only candidate that will draw in new voters among immigrants, women and youth in large cities. I am the only candidate who can unite the party, unite this country, and beat Justin Trudeau. Our unity is our strength. Thank you. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. That concludes tonight's debate. We will remind the media that candidates will be available to answer questions in some 10 minutes in this room. I would like to thank all of you who watched the debate tonight. Good luck, ladies and gentlemen. The race continues. Have an excellent evening.